Hello guys, we're going to talk about the rule of the floating square today. The rule of the floating square is relevant and is very useful when a king has to fight against two separated pass pawns, as is the case here. So we have a white king that has to catch black's two pass pawn before one of them queens. And the black king cannot be involved here, has to watch for both of white pawns in G and H file. Basically, the rule says that if the pawns are on the same rank, such as the case with the black pawns here, and you build a square around them. Let's build a square around the black pawn. And if this square reach the edge of the board, like it is here, then one of the pawns will queen, no matter whose move it is. So in this case, because the square around black pawns reach the edge of the board, then black will win. We can just play it out. It's white to move, let's say b5, king b5, then black simply go e4, king takes e4, a5, and now we actually can use the rule of the square because it's just a king against one pawn. The rule of the square says that you build a square around the pawn, and then because it's black to move, the square will actually shrink even more. So there's no chance that white king can get into this square, so the pawn will promote. Yeah, if you haven't seen the rule of the square before, please check my earlier video. Okay, so now I've shifted the position a bit. I've moved the black pawn from the e5 squares to the d5 squares. The black king, notice that the black king is still not involved. I have to watch for these two pawns. Let's apply the rule of the floating square again. So here we have two black pawns on the same rank. Let's build a square around them. Do it like that, and the square doesn't reach the edge of the board, and that's how I know without doing further calculation that no matter whose turn it is to move, that white will be able to catch both of these pawns. Here I've made it so that it's black turn to move, but yeah, white would still be able to catch the pawns. King d4, and then here we can use the rule of the square again, right? Just like one pawn against the king, and then it's white's king to move, so he get into the square, and the white king will be able to catch both of the pawns. Let's look at another position. Here in this position, I want to show that just because the pawns, the floating square of the pawns does not reach the edge of the board, as is the case here for black, it does not mean that the white king would be able to capture both of the pawns. But here it means that the white king can hold the advance of the black pawns. If that makes sense. It's a subtle distinction, but you will see the difference. So here this endgame is actually a draw, if you see the evaluation, because the white king cannot capture both of the pawns. It can only hold its advance. And the black king also obviously cannot catch both of the pawns and can only hold the advance of white's pawns. Let's just play it. It's white's to move, so king c3 is probably a best try here. I mean, you can go to king a3 and you just have a mirror position. Excuse me. So here black's best try is probably a3, and here is very important for white to not take c4. Obviously that's a blunder, because then this pawn will promote. Let's just show it. This pawn promotes and white is losing. So the right move for white here is actually king c2. Here for black doesn't have any pawn moves. If a2, then white will win easily, and white's still in time to stop this pawn. So a2 doesn't make sense, but c3 doesn't make sense either, because again white still have access to this square and will stop black from queening. So black doesn't have a pawn move here. It only has a king move. So king h7 is the right move. And now for white, white king basically has two tasks, right? Watch for this pawn advance, and also do so in a position where it can still access the b2 square if necessary, as the black pawn advance to a2. So the white king can only shuttle between c3 and c2 without capturing this pawn, and the black king can only shuttle between g8 and h7 to watch these pawns without being able to capture them. So we actually have an interesting draw here, because black will just move between g8 and h7, as I've said, and then white will move back between c3 and c2. So that's what I meant earlier by holding the pawn advances. Just because the floating square does not reach the h does not guarantee that the white king will be able to capture both pawns. If there are two files between them, then the white king will be able to capture both pawns, as we see earlier. But in some other circumstances, it could just mean that white king will only be able to hold their advances and not necessarily capture both pawns. Okay guys, that's all for me this time. I hope you find it useful. Please subscribe and please like if you would like to see more of this kind of content in the future. Thank you very much.